Imagine if you had the conversations with individuals that are going into different companies and they're telling you the secrets, the challenges, the issues, the difficulties that these companies are facing. These companies, might I add, are your ideal customer. Would that conversation not be worthwhile? Well, that's exactly what's happening. I'm interviewing Derrick Williams today on the podcast. He has a new show himself, and he's been able to interview individuals that are doing exactly that. It's fascinating. You're going to love it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we have an amazing guest. His name is Mr. Derrick Williams Jr. You can find information about him in the show notes. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, but tell him that you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist Podcast. Now, Derrick has been on the show a couple of times. You can check out his organization, 3 links. He does a lot of consultancy, and he's amazing when it comes towards helping folks identify and figure out the tech stack and the tools to make their organization run more smoothly. In this conversation today, we're going to talk about his new show, but specifically, we're going to talk about what he's learning from interviewing consultants, sales experts, sales leaders, individual contributors, and finding out what's working right now in sales. You can find he goes over several different things, and it's just fun. One thing that he emphasizes is the fundamentals, and he's going to break down what he means by that, and specifically also some. Actually, I won't give you anything else. You have to listen to it. If this is your first time checking out our show, please go ahead and subscribe. Tell someone else about it as well. Share the link with them and let them know that this podcast is dedicating to helping 100,000 sales professionals this year improve their game by building more effective sales pipeline and converting a higher percentage. I want to impact 100,000 people. So let's get 100,000 people directly impacted. As we dive into the conversation with Derrick, listen for those things, take one piece of advice, and share that with someone else. Let's go ahead and check it out. Derrick, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it being here.
Of course. Always looking forward to bringing on amazing guests. You're part of that elite group of probably like 10 individuals who've been on the show multiple times. So
well, I feel honored.
that's great privilege. And I want to bring, you can give us a little bit about you in a second.
Yeah.
And just kind of preface this for you, for many of the folks that are listening. Derrick is doing some amazing things right now when it comes towards, helping out the sales industry with a new project. So with that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and then this new project?
Yeah, well, the new project is a new podcast. And hey, we always need more sales podcasts, right? But I promise not to make it boring. I promise to keep it informative and have some fire guests for you. So yeah, I'm going to call it the Sales Consultant Podcast. I've been spending the last 8 years really hyper-focused on sales development consulting, as a lot of folks that follow me know. But I'm looking to expand and broaden my research and understand what's working out there. And so part of me getting better as a consultant and just as someone who wants to bring value to my clients, I need to be out there talking to industry experts. I need to be out there looking at what's working and bringing that back into my engagements. And so this is me funneling in those insights and building my own skill set and informing myself. But also I want to share that with those that are on a similar journey. If there's leaders out there, revenue leaders that are grappling with tough issues and want to get insights, I want to make sure that they can pick those up from the podcast. But yeah, it's going to be all about interviewing industry experts and addressing some of the tough issues that revenue leaders are facing. And there's also an interesting slant on it, in that being that I'm calling it the Sales Consultant Podcast, and I'm going to be interviewing a lot of consultants. So I want to make sure that I can share that journey and what that path looks like for other people.
And yeah, I think for many of us, there wasn't like a playbook given before of like, this is what you should follow and this is how you're going to, get into, build an effective consultancy. So I'm excited for it. There's a lot that I can learn from that.
Yeah,
One of my experiences, and one of the experiences I've had, Derrick, is from understanding like for consultants, I call them those honeybees, those like they go around from different companies to companies and they pull a lot of rich insights and data. And that's so if you're a sales rep, if you're a sales leader and you're listening to the show, I highly recommend when that Derrick show, when it launches. When are you launching it, Derrick?
Mid-February, so February 17th, that Friday, because I got to
Nice.
drop it on a Friday.
Hey, there you go.
Fresh
So,
cut Fridays.
fresh cut
Right.
Fridays.
Yeah.
Right when I go to the barber shop, I can listen to that, Caleb.
There you go. There you
Um, but hitting that, getting this would be a great thing for you to listen to because
go.
it's not traditional. Because some of you may think, well, I'm not a sales consultant, but those people know what's going on. They're seeing what's going on in companies and seeing trends. They're interacting with the people that you are trying to sell to, whether they're marketing or sales or folks in RevOps or enablement or just different departments. So
Right. Right.
it's a fun avenue. And what I'm trying to do from this episode is being selfish on it. Really, I would love to learn from you. Like, what are some of the things you're getting from these bumblebees? Like, what are some of the things they're pulling that they're seeing in other companies? So, if you don't mind, you've interviewed some really remarkable people so far: John
Right.
Barrows, um, Jeff Bujoric, and
Frank
some
Cespedes
other
of
French
Harvard,
Texas.
Hillman Sore, of Coach CRM and Closed Loop, and got a lot of other good folks lined up as well from leading consulting firms, from leading organizations, um, leading consultants of independent consultants. So, and even going to be interviewing practitioners, frontline individual contributors, right? So SDRs and
Love it.
AEs that are killing the game. I want to bring them in and see what they're doing and understand their journey. But yeah, I mean, right now, definitely one that rings is the fundamentals, right? I think, and obviously you were one of those persons I recorded with as well. So we'd be remiss if we didn't add you there. But yeah,
He's
the
all right.
fundamentals were one that stuck out because I always try to understand from them what's working and what's not. And sticking to the fundamentals was one that, I recall coming up and being a significant lesson. And a lot of times though, it's you use the basketball analogy. One of the people that I have lined up to interview is a VP of sales at a med device company. He wrote a book called The Point Guard Approach, and it's an analogy on an approach on life and business and sales. Um, but when you think about basketball in the sense that sometimes we jump on the court and we want to do all these fancy moves, we want to shoot threes like Steph, but we haven't really mastered some of the basics of how we position our elbow, how we square up with our feet. And those fundamentals are a lot of times what we miss out. So you would think you'd get some magical beans from folks, but, I think, when you talk to people who've gone from company to company and done 1,000 interviews like yourself, telling you that, hey, through all of this, at the end of the day, the one consistent through line is make sure you stick to the fundamentals in sales. Right. And so I think that's an important piece, making sure that we understand how to communicate value, understand how we know how to keep the funnel full and keeping our head straight and our mind space clear. So I think the fundamentals were definitely one that rung out. Another piece is, I
Well,
asked,
let's stay on that for a second there.
sure, let's do it.
So when it comes to like the notion of the fundamentals, what are some of those areas of fundamentals that you heard that we from your interviews or from your conversations that we need to be aware of, or just like you may see that salespeople neglect that causes them issues because right now going into the climate we're in 2023, we're finding that it is people are being stingy with their dollars and they're
Oh,
being
yeah.
cautious of the way they do it
Right.
and how they utilize that. But what are some of those things that we can do? What are some of those fundamentals that people may have missed or not taken advantage of?
Yeah. Well, when you break down those three areas of filling the funnel or, communicating value, look at communicating value as an example, right? The fundamentals of how you open a call, if you're doing cold
Yeah.
calls and SDR, the fundamentals of how you tie down or ask for confirmation and clarity when you're probing and getting confirmation on things and making sure that you have the right pain points before you go and deliver a proof point in your demo, right? So I think discovery is one of those areas as well that from a fundamental standpoint that we rush through and we don't think critically about. And so we ask some basic questions and then we rush through to the next step. So I think those are some of the areas of fundamentals that I see and that I've heard from these interviews so far that are important areas that we need to, be mindful of. And sometimes we want to bypass or think that, we don't need to spend too much time kind of drilling down on these areas. But, when you practice that demo a lot, and I think practice is another area of fundamentals that we kind of miss out on is practicing our demos, practicing our rebuttals, practicing our openings, practicing our tie downs, and then doing that internally. I asked John Burroughs about this, and we dug into specifically about the issue of practicing and how do we operationalize practicing within a sales organization. Because again, you go back to that basketball analogy, the best in the game, they're going right back to practice right after they finish winning the championship. And so it's that kind of mindset of how do I constantly get better at this. And John Burroughs suggested that you practice on your tier 3 accounts, or those old dormant leads, right? So if you're onboarding into the organization, there's no replacement for real life practice. Yeah, you can do role plays. He supports role plays. There's a place for that. And I agree. And there's probably some structured stuff we can talk through about how you really bolster the fundamentals of practicing role plays. But he emphasized practicing in real time. Like, again, basketball analogy, a scrimmage, full speed, practice at full speed as much as you can and get those reps up.
Yeah, because I think you can definitely in a driveway practice or in the game practice. The practice is good. Like again, those role plays, you're mastering the fundamentals. You're doing those things, different stages, right? But it makes sense there with that full scrimmage. When we did it, when I played soccer, and that was one of the things that I loved, was when we played full scrimmage at practice, right? You get a chance to have some fun,
stretch your
get a
legs
chance
and really
to
show
get
them what you
dirty
got.
a little bit. Show up, make sure you get on that varsity starting squad.
Right.
But it was there's techniques that can come from just a real life motion. So I appreciate that. And I put down discovery here, and I was contemplating that and looking at some notes around here too. Like the I feel like so often the deal actually in my book, in the way that we do our training, actually gets closed, or the closing really starts in discovery. But oftentimes I've done this where I've missed the fundamentals and just figured, I had a good conversation with folks, so I know their problem, and then next thing you know, this deal stalls in my pipeline and becomes dead weight because there wasn't real discovery, it wasn't real purpose, there wasn't a real compelling event that made this like a priority. It was just more of a flash in the pan. So it's good. So listen, guys, you need to make sure you're doing the fundamentals.
Absolutely. There's bigger picture stuff that we talk about too. I had Frank Cespedes of Harvard on as well, and he's talking about the fundamentals of business sales. And one of the things that he unpacks with me is the cost of false positives have a bigger impact on our business, and we can't afford them the way that we used to.
What's the false positive that you would probably?
Thank you. Yeah, I tend to just ramble on. A false positive in hiring, a false positive in our targeting. You talk a lot about selling with insights and getting that targeting right. And so he emphasizes that we cannot afford the false positive. We never really could, right? Irresponsibly, if we were thinking that we could just, burn all the money and explore all these avenues. But the reality is the headwinds of a possible recession and actively dealing with inflationary times, you have to get it right. And so we have to do our due diligence even more so. So when we think about the routes to market that we're considering, when we think about the hiring that we're doing, thinking about going up or down market, and those plays that we want to, those product innovations, right? The false positives of going down a path for a year and realizing it didn't work are majorly detrimental in this climate, right? 2024, 2025, you may not be around if you can't get it right in 2023 to a degree. So the false positives, he breaks down a bit in our interview, which is really enlightening, right? He takes an academic approach towards this with, 30 years of, teaching at Harvard to MBAs about these issues and how to manage these things forward. And he wrote a book called Sales Management That Works. And that's what was the catalyst for me to bring him on the show and really start the podcast in some ways, right? I had the podcast idea for a long time, but when him and I interacted, I felt like I got to get this interview recorded and I got to share these insights with everyone. So we break down the book a bit, but the false positives that we can't afford any longer in our climate was enlightening. And it affirms, I think, a lot of the suspicions that we have. But when you hear it from an academic, the way he breaks it down, it's like, okay, yeah, there's definitely some action I can take from this. And there's definitely some, you're going to have to be more accountable to the decisions that you're making. You're going to have to be more, fact-based in your process, and you're doing more effective due diligence and research before you choose a path, before you hire, and these different things that we talked about.
Why do you feel that we make the jump so often with false positives? I mean, it'd be interesting to see some of the data, like how many false positives on average, like say the a seller makes or a sales organization make. But
Right.
going back to them in general, though, like when it comes to hire or just like in the discovery, why do you feel that we tend to make these false positives?
Well, I mean, if you think about the hiring piece of it alone, I think I come back to that. We want to move fast,
Hmm.
right? And I think that just we want to get the rev. We know this person has $1 million quota that we want to, and they have to ramp up. They get through onboarding. We need to get them live and get them producing. So there's definitely the speed factor of just wanting to rush things so that we can actualize that revenue that we think is inevitable. So in that, I think we're not as cautious. And I think we've been in a climate for a while, and I'm no economist whatsoever, but we've been in a climate around the VC area, particularly where burn rates have been exceptionally high.
Hmm.
And it's almost been encouraged to go out there and take those risks and try new things. And we'll still try and experiment, and we definitely want to encourage that. But we got to make sure that we're taking scientific approaches to this as opposed to just using our gut and winging it. And I think that's the point that he makes: is winging it is just because it's kind of like what you did at the last company or what the other companies are doing. Um, may have more detrimental effects on the business this go around. So if you hire the wrong person and you invest all that time in training and onboarding and flying them around the country in some cases, if they're in that position, and then you get down the road and you realize it's not a good fit, that 6 months that you wasted, if you will, could have a 2-year impact on your business.
Yeah.
So I think there's that ripple effect. And why do we do that? Again, it's just, we have been conditioned to accept a certain amount of risk, and we have to pull that back a bit.
Yeah. It's hold down on that speed. And I think again, go back in the climate here, we want to. It's just more about making that right decision. Um, and and I know some folks are listening to this and say, well, Derrick, Donald, like, what about the, paralysis by analysis
Mm.
idea as well? And it's not necessarily, and my take on that is not that you're, or Frank is saying, or whatnot, that we can't have some kind of urgency. It's just making sure you're evaluating that it's the right thing before you, um,
Right.
pull the trigger.
Put the right practices in place to help
Yeah.
mitigate the risk, right? Do your due diligence on that sales leader and make sure you're clear about the role, the expectations, so that they don't onboard and 3 months later they're like, yeah, this isn't what I signed up for, and take off. I mean, that's leadership changes like that can have a major ripple effect in the organization. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's making sure that you have the right inclusive hiring, interviewing practice, right? Make sure you have the right people interviewing people, and make sure you're looking at the right core competencies. Make sure you're crafting these questions in advance, right? Instead of winging your interview
Yeah.
process or just saying, you know what, hey, so and so liked him, he did so okay over there, he's got to do okay here, making these leaping assumptions. So we got to sort of validate those assumptions through some sort of insights. And we're in a state now where it's sometimes just a few clicks away to realize, this may not be the right person for this role, or a phone call away from kind of backdooring that if you have that opportunity. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think we can be more structured in a lot of these practices. So that's one false positive in terms of hiring. Another false positive is when you think about targeting accounts and who you're going to go after. And, are we really being thorough in that identification process? Are we just relying on firmographics still, and
Yeah.
technographics maybe now? But are you taking taking to deeper levels and looking at, intent data combined with contextual intent, looking at triggers that we talked about in our conversation that are specific to that business, and then getting it down to a finite number. So, it's not about having more. You want to get that TAM really ratcheted down to those that you think can inhale your product, and that propensity analysis really needs to be thought through. So it's important that you take the extra 2 or 3 months to do that due diligence and make that trade-off, so that you aren't, or you mitigate the chances of you going down the wrong path. I don't know. I don't know. You listen to hip hop maybe a little bit. J. Cole has a
Hmm.
line in a song called "Love Yours," and it's congratulations, you went a long way, but bad news, you went the wrong way. And right, we have to be mindful of that stuff. Like we can't go the wrong way in this climate.
Yeah, no, it's making that doubling back. Sometimes you have to, but doubling back now can be very costly, and it may be it may have the negative impact, the impact that you don't necessarily want.
Right,
Uh,
right. Hmm.
so I love this, man. There's so many great insights. There's so many great gems from it, like so far, and it sounds like the show is going to be a good hit. I mean, some of the takeaways that I'm pulling from this so far is one, getting the making sure that I have like mastering of that fundamental, making
Yeah,
sure I do some full court practice, those lost ops, taking advantage of those. Good love, John Barrows there, and then making sure I'm before I spend that dollar that I'm spending the dollar in the right area, so to speak. Making sure that I'm not going on the wrong path. And Frank has a bunch of great things, and we'll link back to Frank in this episode as well. So if
yeah.
you guys want to go ahead and follow him, but most importantly, I want you to check out Derrick's show when it drops on February 17th. But Derrick, if there folks want to get a hold of you, I mean, for beyond the show, I know you do a lot in the consultancy world as well. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, so definitely look me up there. Just Derrick Williams Jr. is the LinkedIn handle. Um, but Instagram, I'm pretty active there. Derrick is 3Link Sales, and then the website 3linksales.com.
All right, we're going to link back to those in the show notes, no pun intended. So folks can
No,
get
it's
connected to you.
intentional. It's definitely intentional. And I'll
But
say one last thing as well for
yeah,
those
yeah,
that are aspiring to be in a consultant, whether independent consultant or what have you. A lot of times, sales folks feel like they can bring a lot more value to more people because it's a tough thing to crack. And if you feel like you can bring that value to folks and you want to enter into the sales consulting, coaching, training arena, this is also going to be a good podcast for you to glean from as well. Because the consultants that I interview, like John Burroughs is a trainer, yourself, and others, um, they walk through their path and their journey to becoming a sales consultant, and they talk about that process. They talk about their frameworks and their practice. So it's also a good place to understand what that looks like. So folks that are looking to maybe make that jump or moonlight as a consultant, whatever your aspirations might be in that arena, consultants, trainers, coaches, tune in.
love it, man. I appreciate you. Thank you again. Congratulations on the show. Excited for the launch.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'll see you soon.
That was Derrick Williams, and I told you this was going to be good. Go ahead and check out his new show. You can find it, all the details about it, launching on February 17th. You can also connect with him on LinkedIn, Derrick Williams Jr. Tell him you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist podcast. Now, speaking about hearing on a podcast, our sponsors are giving you offers, and I want you to check them out, take advantage of the things that they're giving, because it's going to be really helpful for you as an organization, as an individual. That's what it's all about. As always, we do this show because we want to help you to build a healthier sales pipeline. We want you to convert a higher percentage of that sales pipeline. I want you to raise your level of thinking and go out and do big things. See you in the next episode.